Welcome to the Therapist HQ, your weekly pep talk for private practice pros. Let's dive in.
Hello, and welcome back to the Therapist HQ, your weekly private practice pep talk. My name is Alicia Murray. As always, I am so glad that you're here and choosing to spend this time with me. This week's pep talk is going to be a really, really cool one and a question that I get a lot about, and that is EHR systems and switching EHRs. So this is actually like exactly my 2-year anniversary of switching my entire group practices EHR, which was hella scary to think about doing and to start the process of. And like most things that we encounter in our practice or that I talk to you guys about, it was not scary once I got into it. Okay. It was so seamless and so easy. And I want that for every single person who is listening to this, who is so frustrated with their EHR, thinking about what they actually need in an EHR, feeling like it's not working for them, but they're not sure like what to look for and how to look for it. And I am hoping to answer all of those questions in the next 20 or 30 minutes of our time together. So let's dive in. Okay, so 2 years ago, this July, 2 years ago, my group practice, which at the time was made up of 6 fully licensed clinicians, myself, and an admin staff, it was my biller on staff at that time, we were using Theranest. And full disclosure, this is my podcast. And so I am going to be dropping names, dropping prices, the whole shebang so that we can really paint a full picture and so that I can help you to make the best decision possible for you and your practice. So, like I said, 2 years ago, my whole group practice was on Theranest. I started out with Theranest. I actually started in like the eye therapy family. I'm not even sure that they offer this anymore, but essentially eye therapy grouped together Hushmail, Theranest, and phone.com. So it was like one monthly price that you were paying, and it included all 3 of those things. Looking back, it really wasn't even discounted. It was just all 3 prices linked together, which in hindsight, I think that by them forcing you into which providers you were using in the bundle, it should have been discounted, but that is just my personal opinion. Anywho, we were using this EHR, and I remember the December before, so about 7 months before this, my husband and I were looking at my profit and loss statement because he's just more of a numbers guy than I am. I am the brains behind the operation. He's the numbers. And we were looking at my profit and loss statement, and he looked at the category for software, which is our EHR. And he said, "You need to fix this." And I was like, "Okay, honey, love that advice, but I literally need this to run my practice. Like, these are our appointments. This is our billing. This is our virtual sessions. Like, everything is housed inside of our EHR." I was like, I can't just close it. Like, that is the business. And he was like, this is insane. This is eating an insane amount of your profit. Like, you need to do something about this. And I was like, okay, consider me overwhelmed because this is the backbone of our practice and everything is built off of how the hell do I move forward in getting rid of this or changing this? So as all really, great business owners do, I sat on it for the next 3 or 4 months. And I want to say in April or May, I had somebody from Jane reach out to me and say like, "Hey, have you ever thought about switching your EHR?" And I was like, "Well, actually, did my husband send you into my DMs?" Because yes, I am, frustrated for a variety of reasons. Cost first and foremost, customer support second, because with Theranest, there was no customer support team, at least like at the time that I had them. Everything went through emails and tickets, and it took it took up to 14 days sometimes to get a response about billing or about glitches that they were having or about how to do something. And it wasn't really answered online in their online forum. And as you know, when you're running a practice, like that is not an okay turnaround time for customer support. Like we need to get the billing out the door. We need to get our out of network claims submitted. We need to run invoices. Like we can't be waiting 14 days to get an answer on things that we need that are essential to run the business, right? And there was also, it was just clunky, right? Like it was just the workflows wasn't what I wanted it to be. I wanted to start incorporating groups. I wanted to incorporate longer sessions. And it felt like every time that I wanted to grow, it was almost not worth it. And I felt myself getting deterred to incorporate new things in my practice or even bring on part time staff because I'm like, it's just so expensive and such a high startup to like get these clinicians going on this system. And also, what a horrible reason to stop ourselves from growing, right? So, all's to say, when someone reached out to me and was like, "Hey, have you ever thought of switching?" I was like, "Oh boy, have I." And so I hopped on a call with them and was very honest about my concerns. I was like, "Listen, I have a group, which means I have these 6 other clinicians, and I have worked in hospitals before who have switched over their systems. And let me tell you, morale was low around that time. And I'm not sure if anybody listening has gone through that, but I remember explicitly working at a hospital when they switched over their whole charting system. And boy, you would think like it was an apocalypse in the hospital. Like it was frustrating. It was a huge learning curve. Nobody knew how to use it. They still had these expectations for documentation to get done. And I brought these concerns up and was like, listen, I have a really good thing going with my staff right now, and I don't want to ruin this with this transition. Also, I do know that in the long run, they would be happier with a system that is an easier workflow, has more features built in, is easier for them to do different offerings like groups or intensives or longer sessions. Like I know the outcome they will be happy with, but this intermediary, I'm very concerned about the satisfaction of my therapist. I want them to be happy. I do not want them to be stressed. I do not want this to be like an administrative burden for them. And additionally, my biller, she's just an independent biller. She is this amazing, amazing woman. But she has told me from the jump, like technology, like is a learning curve for me. She was using Simple Practice with her previous clinicians that she worked with. She learned Theranest. And in my mind, I was like, oh my gosh, now I'm going to make this poor woman learn a whole new system all over again. And how is she going to respond? And is she going to be frustrated? And is she going to, need more admin time? Because I was paying her hourly at the time. Am I going to be paying more hourly for her because of the learning curve and because of how long it's going to take to do her daily and weekly tasks on this new system? That is an important thing to note because we're going to circle back to that later. So I brought all these concerns up, and the representative that I talked to at Jane was so fantastic at not only walking me through what that transition would look like on my end and on my therapist and admin end, but also like what it would look like for the clients. Like, what would it look like on Monday morning when the clients who were scheduled for appointments were logging into a new system, being introduced to a new system? And I think that that information really like broke down some of those, I think, like defensive walls for me because I was defensive in the terms of like I was being protective of my systems and my operations and the people that worked for me, right? Like I'm very protective of the people who trust me to make their job easy, to pay them every week, to provide a good working environment. And I want to protect the sacredity of that as much as possible. And so by being able to physically see what this transition would look like and see the timeline and see the expectations that would be taking place, I feel like that really broke down those walls for me and made me much more open to exploring this. So, the next thing that I looked at when I was switching was, of course, cost and features, right? Because I wanted to make sure that if I was going through this process of switching the entire system, that I was going to stay with the system that I was switching to. This is not something that I wanted to do twice. Okay. This isn't even something that I had planned on doing once. So I definitely did not want to be doing this twice. And so as I do, I made myself a spreadsheet. I know. You're very surprised that I made myself a spreadsheet. And I made myself a spreadsheet. And the first thing that I looked at was cost. Let me just be so for real with you. I was paying over $800 a month for just the EHR portion of my eye therapy bill. So just Theranest for me, 6 clinicians, and an admin staff. I was paying over $800. And I'm sure now you're understanding why my husband was pretty kerfluffled at the cost at the end of the year of over $800 a month times 12 months, right? When I looked at the exact same setup with Jane, my cost was going to be around $240 a month. And let me tell you, the girl math that kicked in from that, I was like, oh, I'm actually profiting $600 a month from this switch. Like, that's huge. Like, that's benefits I can give back to the staff. That is trainings that I can take. That is things that I can invest in for the practice. $600 a month for, a semi small group virtual practice is not a small amount of money by any means. And so the cost, truly no brainer when you see that on paper, right? And then I moved towards features. And I really, when I work with therapists on choosing their EHR or switching their EHR, I don't like for therapists to use terms like features and clunky and easy and streamlined because they're so big and vast, right? Like we want to look at the details of what our EHR is actually doing for us and what we're looking for the EHR to do for us, right? And so I broke it down in terms of client journey because that just made the most sense in my head. So I thought about first and foremost, when a client finds us, I want to direct them to a client portal that is customizable because I want it to look like my website. Like I want them to naturally transition from Google or from my website where they're seeing our logo, our branding colors, our photos, and naturally transition over to our booking page where it feels like they are in the same place but now they are at the next step, which is booking. And I wanted that to be, like I said, customizable. I wanted there to be different options as far as booking for individual sessions, couple sessions, group sessions. I wanted the ability to make some services not available to be booked online. So, like our sliding scale sessions, our sessions with interns, like I wanted more of a thorough sort of like back end system for that. And so I wanted to make sure that I could also hide some things from being booked online. And I will just tell you, with Theranest, there was no customization. Like the client portal was the client portal. It was branded with Theranest's branding, with their fonts, with their colors. It was not pretty and it was not vibey and it was not aesthetic. Okay. And on the other side of it, the Jane client portal was fully customizable. You could add your logo, you could add your branding colors, you could add photos of each clinician when potential clients were looking through the calendar, which I thought was a really nice touch because conversion wise, like photos convert, right? Like we know this from our website, our psychology today, photos convert. People are looking to build a relationship with a therapist. And so they want to see a photo of that therapist. And so having the therapist photos on there was huge for me. Being able to include their bios on the Jane booking page was huge for me. And also being able to add in specialties. And this was actually a recommendation from like way, way back when I first created my website. Was my website designer asked, like, can you carry over your specialties from your website into your booking page so that people don't get lost in the sauce in terms of like, well, I wanted to book with a trauma therapist and now I'm over on the booking page and now I just see a list of names and I have no idea who anyone is and how do I know who to book with? And I thought, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense, right? Like, of course, like I know my therapist through and through, but somebody who has never heard of our practice, has never worked with any of us, they're just seeing a list of names. They don't know who to book with and for what. And so, with Jane's ability on their online booking page to be able to add in different categories of trauma therapy, postpartum therapy, anxiety therapy, depression therapy, and I can plug the therapist into multiple of those categories. But when a potential client is moving from a specialty page on our website, they're moving from, let's say, our trauma specialty page on our website. They click the link on that page to book online. And now instead of just rolling through therapist names and pictures, they're looking for trauma therapists on that booking page. They're seeing the photos of who offers trauma therapy. They can click on those photos for the bio. It's like an extension of our website, right? And I have noticed a higher conversion. Like I've had 2 years to sort of sit on this data, and I have noticed a higher conversion between website to the button clicks to booking on our online booking page. And while I can't definitively say why that is, I do think that that workflow has definitely improved it. 100%. The next part of the client journey that I looked at was when a client booked with us, and let's say that they bypassed the initial consultation call and they booked their first intake session, I wanted as many things automated as possible because I don't want that to be on the admin staff. I don't want things to fall through the cracks. I love an automation and I wanted all of that to be there. And so I looked at the back end of both Theranest and Jane, and they both did offer automations of when a client books, it will automatically send their intake paperwork over. But I found that Jane went a little bit further than that because with Jane, you could customize the intake forms that go with specific treatments. And so, having a group practice, I do have different informed consents for each therapist because I want each therapist's name and license number and NPI number in their informed consent because that is all information that the client has the right to know. And there is a section for New York State informed consents that you have to include, like how they could potentially file a grievance against a therapist. That's just something that is required because, again, it's a client's right to know. And so, for each therapist in the practice, I have to include their license number and NPI number. And so in Theranest, I had to have one consent because the only option for folks booking was to send one automated consent. I had to have every single therapist's license and NPI number in the informed consent. And I just didn't like this because I don't think that we need to be sending our therapist information to every single client in the practice if they're not seeing them. And it just felt clunky and like a little unprofessional, right? Like I want a more individualized experience. And so with Jane, when folks book a specific treatment with a specific therapist, it triggers their own intake paperwork to be sent to them. And the therapist came to really like this because some therapists like for a GAD to be sent with their initial intake because they like to grab a baseline of their symptoms. Or some folks like to have different trauma scales or different postpartum scales that are automatically sent to grab this baseline before they even enter the intake with the client. And we were able to do that and follow the lead of what every single therapist wanted in terms of what their intake process looked like. And I think that that has really, really helped with the satisfaction and the ease of the therapist in my practice with taking on new clients. Additionally, with the intake paperwork, we were able to request their insurance information if they wanted us to be submitting their out of network claims for them. We were able to request a photo of their driver's license and we are able to request their payment information to be submitted on their end because with Theranest, it was always on the clinician to run the first payment and then save their payment information from there. And it was just another thing to remember, right? Like when a therapist is sitting down in session with a client, my goal with them in my practice is to just let them do the therapeutic work. Like I don't want them to worry about all of this back end admin mumbo jumbo. And so having the ability for the client to just input their payment information and get that out of the way rather than with Theranest, we were ending session and then I was like, oh, I have to grab your payment real quick. Can you go find your card? Like, we have to run this in session. Like, is it okay if I save it to your file? Like, it just felt clunky. I hate to keep saying that word. I didn't like that process. And I honestly didn't know that other systems would offer the client to be able to do this on their own. And so that was huge for us. And it has really overall just streamlined that intake process for us. And going along with the intake process, Jane has a template library which has been really helpful for my therapist because they have been able to go in and anybody who is using Jane can add their own templates to the template library. So they can add different assessments, scales, interventions, progress notes, intake forms. And so if I have a therapist who's like, I actually want them to fill out a full intake before they meet with me, they can look through this template library. They can customize a template that they like. They can create a new template and they can save it in the template library if they'd like and have that as part of their intake work that sends over to new and potential clients. And that part is really cool because I don't like searching the internet for stuff like that, right? Like, I want to know that those things are coming from actual clinicians who are actually using these things in their practice. And so that template library has been huge with Theranest. Their template library was exclusively their forms. And so they were a little boring, right? Like there wasn't a lot of diversification to them. You could tell that they were just like really standard things that they searched the internet for and then added to their template library as like a feature. Now in hindsight, now that I've seen like a real template library. And so that has been super helpful. And even going along in treatment, like finding new scales and interventions and playing around with different progress note templates has been super, super helpful to have access to within Jane. So sticking with like my workflow around my decision making, the next thing that I looked at was obviously like having the client on your schedule and then logging in for the virtual session. Both Theranest and Jane offered the virtual sessions right through the platform. Theranest was through Zoom, and Jane's is right inside the Jane platform, which I know that Zoom, we were using the HIPAA compliant version of Zoom, but I also think that a lot of folks that we work with were using Zoom so much for their work that it kind of felt funny to like log off of a Zoom for their work and then log into a Zoom with their therapist, right? So I did like that was very preferential that everything was like in house with Jane. And then, of course, I looked at things like billing and documentation and just the workflow of how the clinicians are seeing their clients, closing out session, and then doing their progress notes. And again, having access to that template library. Every single therapist could have a custom way of how they're completing their documentation, which I really like because therapists aren't prone to use the same interventions, the same tools, the same assessments, the same documentation strategies. And so giving them that flexibility and that freedom to choose what worked for them is really, really amazing to be able to do. I know for my progress notes, I use like a checkbox note just because I can do it a lot quicker. And so that has been really, really helpful to be able to grab it off the template library and customize it to my liking. So then I want to bring it to billing and my sweet, sweet biller. Okay. Because I was probably the most nervous about how she would respond to the change and to the features. And I will get to the transition right after this. But after we switched over to Jane and she started going through her own workflow, which was running all of the invoices, either daily or weekly, submitting all of the out of network claims, checking on the out of network claims, rectifying any issues with the claims, and then also running reports for payroll. You guys, when I tell you, when my biller takes on new therapists that she works with, she asks them to switch to Jane. Okay. Like, I don't know of a better endorsement of this switch and making the right decision than that. And I will have clinicians that she takes on that come to me and they're like, hey, so and so wants me to switch to Jane. Like, can you help me do that? And I'm like, yes, of course I can help you do that. But she loves the workflow, the systems. That woman was on the phone and on the chat with customer support more times than I can count. And she loved every second of it. Like they would answer the phone immediately, they would answer the chat immediately. She would get in, get out. I did not have to pay her extra admin hours like I was afraid of. We actually ended up moving to like a monthly package because her hours were so predictable with her workflow and Jane rather than with Theranest. It was like, well, some things took a really long time and some things ended up being quicker and some things ended up taking longer because X, Y, and Z. Things became so predictable and streamlined for her that we were able to move into just like a flat fee, monthly fee because we all knew exactly what to expect with that workflow. And now she's Jane's greatest champion, hands down. So as far as like checking the features and the actual software of it, there were a couple other back-end things that I, as the clinic owner, looked at, like reports, like additional features that I could add, like growth and the ability to add new clinicians, to add new services. And a couple things that I really liked about Jane was that when you bring on new clinicians, they do offer like a part-time clinician pricing, which was super helpful for me because a lot of clinicians that I bring on do start part-time because they start in addition to another job that they're doing, or they start on nights and weekends. And I am totally okay with that. But I had to make sure that I didn't have to keep paying full price for a clinician who was maybe only seeing like 5 or 6 clients a week, right? And so, with the reporting features, the ability to grow into different services, and the ease of bringing on new clinicians without it being such a financial burden was all definitely, in Jane's favor on my spreadsheet when I was thinking about this switch. So, as you can imagine, thinking through what my spreadsheet looked like, I went ahead with the switch to Jane. And so I met with the Jane team again and let them know I'd be switching, let them know what package I would be doing, how many clinicians I would be having. Admin staff is always free with Jane. So I have 2 admin staff now, and their accounts are totally free on my Jane app. And we talked through the logistics of what this switch would look like. So, first things first, because a lot of people are always interested in, like, well, how much time is this going to take me? Right? Like, how much time am I going to have to invest in making this switch? And the biggest time investment that I had was exporting all of our documentation from Theranest and then uploading it into the transfer portal into Jane. So Jane gave me access to a unique portal where I would upload all of our documentation from Theranest. And the really cool thing was that Jane has step-by-step instructions depending on what EHR you're transferring from on how to quickly export all of your files. So my workflow for this was I just printed out our entire client list and just had to go through client by client and export their whole file and then import it into the transfer portal. I want to say total, this probably took me about 5 hours, and I split it into a couple different days. Once everything was imported into this transfer portal, we picked a day, and they let me pick any day of the week that I wanted to. And so I picked a Friday afternoon because I thought the majority of our clinicians are seeing folks Monday through Friday. I actually asked clinicians not to schedule for that weekend just because I wasn't sure. Like, I didn't want things to get lost in the sauce, right? Like, I wanted things to make sense logistically. And so we didn't take any clients that weekend, which was totally by choice. Looking back, they could have still seen them through Theranest and then written the documentation in Jane. But again, I just wanted to simplify it as much as possible. So Friday afternoon, the transfer team started. We were on an email thread together. If they had any questions that came up, or if I had any questions that came up, I was able to very easily reach them. Like, they would get back to me within a half hour anytime that we were communicating together. I thought that it wouldn't be done until Sunday night. They emailed me Saturday afternoon and they were like, "Hey, you're all set. Like, you're good. Like, go on and be free." And I remember being like, "Oh my gosh, like, this was, first of all, so quick. Second of all, like, I didn't have to do anything. I thought that I would have to be a little bit more hands-on as far as transferring things into Jane. But when I logged into Jane, all of our clients were there. All of their intake forms and past documentation were in their charts as a PDF. So you could look through every single piece of documentation that they had from Theranest. And then all I had to do from there was customize. And let me just add a trick that my biller and I figured out because we were a little cautious on closing our Theranest account, but obviously I was very eager to get that bill off of my account. And so what we figured out that we could do is we archived every single client in Theranest so that we showed like 0 active clients. And then we were able to put our Theranest account into an archive account, which was only $5 a month to do so. And if we unarchived a client, like let's say we had to go in and maybe like see what their insurance was that they were using, or just random little tidbits like that. We could unarchive them, grab that information, and then re-archive them and maintain that $5 a month bill to basically just remain access to Theranest. So now it's Sunday. All of our documentation is inside of Jane, and we are going to start our clinic day Monday morning with all of the therapists using Jane. So I spent probably 2 hours on Sunday setting up the back end of things, right? So this included every staff profile. So I went in and added all of their photos from our website, shortened, like condensed bio from our website for each of them. I set up our client portal. I didn't initially set it up to what it is now, just because I was in this mode of like, I just need to get it out there. Like, I need to just get it done. And so I set up the client portal in a very basic way. I updated everybody's availability. I added services for everybody. So whether they were doing individual, whether they were doing couples, whether they were doing groups, I added different service codes and color coordination for every single clinician. I got my biller in there. We met briefly just about how we wanted to go about grabbing all of the new payment information because legally you can't transfer credit, debit, HSA card information from one platform to another. So no matter where you go, what you switch to, you have to re-enter all of the payment information. And so we decided to just have the clinicians grab that at each appointment. At the end of every week, if we had an appointment and they didn't submit their payment information, my biller would reach out and try to grab that from them. Same thing with their insurance. We set a reminder to input all of their insurance information because that information also could not transfer over. And so we talked about the same process that the clinician would attempt to grab it. If they forgot, if the client didn't have it on them, then my biller would follow up with a phone call at the end of the week and try to grab that information. Something that I was really anticipating with this switch was the client end of it. When I tell you I cleared my schedule to answer client calls, texts, and emails about getting into session, about new links, about trouble accessing the session or getting in touch with their clinicians. And you guys, I had not one call or text or email from a client about difficulty with this. And let me tell you why. When you first start out with Jane, you can send a welcome message and you can customize this welcome message. And so the welcome message goes to every single active client that you have in your system. And so I created the welcome message just to say like, hey, this is Alicia, the owner of Community Counseling Services. I just want to let you know that we switched over our system into this new secure HIPAA compliance system called Jane. This is where your sessions will be held going forward. All of your information has been, transferred privately and securely into this new platform. The only things we need from you is an updated credit, debit, or HSA card inputted into your account. Here's how you're going to do it. Here's the link to create your new portal account. And if you're using out of network billing, here's the link, here's the instructions on how to make sure that that information is also in here so you're not having any disruption in your reimbursements that are coming through. Yeah, so when I tell you I had a very quiet couple of days, Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, because I fully thought that I'd be fielding phone calls and texts and emails and like troubleshooting and being like a tech support person, which I am not by nature. Yeah, no, silence. Radio silence, grasshoppers. Like I was checking in with my clinicians at the end of every day. I'm like, "Hey, how's everything going?" And they're like, "Fine, great, good, love it, love the system, love the telehealth, like love the notes. Everything's fine, everything's great." And then I always have that thought that always comes up of like, "Why the hell did I not do this sooner? Why did I sit on this expensive bill for software that I didn't even like and like wasn't even serving what I wanted to do with the practice when I could have just switched it and everything was fine. Everything was fine." So, all's to say, of course, it was a learning curve on my end as far as like back end features went. Like when I took on interns and I wanted them to sit in on sessions with me and just incorporating the virtual telehealth link to be able to do so, or implementing groups, or running different reports to see different details of tracking in our practice. And like I said, updating the client portal page so that I could organize it by specialty and just increase that conversion even more from our website into our client portal. But when all was said and done, the way that I would never, ever, ever go back to Theranest, to anywhere else, because this truly has everything I need and at such an affordable price point where I feel more comfortable testing out different add-ons that they bring in, or testing out, different features. Like they have an AI scribe to help with documentation. You can incorporate different groups and classes. And I'm so much more inclined to be able to let my clinicians try those things out, even if it means that I'm paying an added fee for it, because I feel like it's such a fair price for all of the features that I'm getting. So genuinely, if you are feeling uninspired by your software, like if this is just something that you open up every day in your practice and you're like, oh gosh, like it's, acting up today, or I'm getting more emails that they're raising the prices, or I'm getting more emails that the features that I'm using are now a la carte pricing, or the ethics behind this company are just not lining up to what I want it to be anymore. Or if you feel like your software is preventing you from growing in your practice the way that you want to, if you're afraid to incorporate new groups or intensives or classes, or you're afraid to take on staff because of the cost or because of clunkiness behind it. If you have never been able to get in touch with a real life customer support person behind your software, those are all pretty concrete signs that it is time to make the switch. And of course, I want you to be making a good informed decision when you do make the switch. In the show notes, I'm going to be including a totally free guide on switching your EHR. And I'm also going to be including a free 30-day startup at Jane so that your first 30 days with Jane are completely free. And above all, I want you to take away from all of this that you don't have to hold on to that fear and be scared of this the way that you may be feeling or that you think that you should be. Because yes, this is a big decision for your practice, but it is not a scary one, and it is not an intimidating one, and is not anything that is going to wreck your practice or be majorly disruptive in your practice. And the end result is so worth it. I promise you, the dread that you are feeling leading up to this is nothing compared to the relief that you will feel when you are on the other side. So like I said, be sure to check in the show notes for that free guide on switching EHRs. It'll go through everything that I went through today about how to make that informed decision around making sure that the EHR you're switching to is the right one for you. And I will also be including a free link for your first 30 days of Jane for free. As always, if you have any questions about anything I talked about today, feel free to leave a comment or to message me on Instagram at the Therapist HQ, or email me at hello@therapisthq.co. If this podcast episode was helpful for you, I would be so appreciative if you would like, review, and subscribe. It is the absolute best way to support this podcast. And I am above all so grateful that you spent this time with me. Take care of yourselves, take care of your practices, and I will see you next week.